What if every healer failed, and the last hope for a dying boy came from the most unlikely captive? A tale of survival, courage, and an impossible choice is about to unfold. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The harsh Texas sun beat down upon the Comanche camp nestled in the shadow of the Wichita Mountains. The year was 1868, and the once mighty Comanche nation was fighting for its very survival. Swift Arrow, the respected war chief, paced anxiously outside his teepee, his weathered face etched with worry. Inside, his only son, Little Hawk, lay burning with fever for the fourth consecutive day. "The white man's disease consumes him," whispered Yellowbird, Swift Arrow's wife, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. "Our medicine man has tried everything." Swift Arrow nodded grimly. 3 shamans had attempted to cure the boy, each one failing as the child grew weaker. Little Hawk was only 10 summers old, but the tribe placed great hope in him. He had shown unusual wisdom and courage for his age. "There is another shaman from the northern band arriving tomorrow," Swift Arrow said, though his voice lacked conviction. The white man's diseases had devastated their people, and traditional medicine seemed powerless against them. As dusk fell over the camp, commotion erupted at the perimeter. Swift Arrow emerged from his teepee to find his warriors returning from a raid, dragging a captive behind them. A white woman, her blue dress torn and dirty, her blonde hair tangled with dust and blood. "We found her traveling with a small wagon train," reported Running Wolf, Swift Arrow's trusted lieutenant. "They fought bravely but were few. This one has unusual possessions." The warriors presented a small wooden case filled with glass bottles and instruments unfamiliar to the tribe. Swift Arrow studied the woman carefully. Though disheveled and frightened, she stood with a certain dignity. "I am Sarah Mitchell," she announced in a clear voice that surprised them. "I am a doctor, a healer." The warriors exchanged skeptical glances. A woman healer. The very notion seemed ridiculous to them. Swift Arrow was about to dismiss her claims when Yellowbird emerged from their teepee, desperation in her eyes. "My husband," she pleaded. "Our son grows worse. If she claims to heal—" Swift Arrow hesitated, torn between skepticism and desperation. "Woman," he addressed Sarah in halting English, "my son burns with fever, your people's sickness. If you can heal him, you will live. If not—" He left the threat unspoken. Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. "Take me to him," she said without hesitation, "and I need my medicines." Inside the teepee, Little Hawk lay on a bed of buffalo hides, his small body racked with chills despite the sweat that soaked his skin. Sarah knelt beside him, professional instinct overriding her fear. She examined him carefully, checking his pulse, his eyes, his throat. "It appears to be influenza, complicated by pneumonia," she murmured more to herself than to her captors. She turned to Swift Arrow. "I need clean water, boiled and cooled, and I need a fire kept burning." For hours, Sarah worked tirelessly. She prepared herbal infusions from her own supplies, coaxed the semi-conscious boy to drink, and applied cool compresses to his burning forehead. All the while, Swift Arrow watched her with intensity, his hand never far from his knife. As dawn broke, Little Hawk's fever finally broke. The boy's breathing eased and he fell into a natural sleep rather than the restless unconsciousness of fever. "He will need care for several days," Sarah explained, her own exhaustion evident. "But the worst has passed. With proper care, he should recover fully." Swift Arrow studied her face, searching for deception and finding none. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why help the child of your enemy?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I took an oath to heal the sick. All the sick, regardless of who they are. I am a doctor before I am anything else." Something shifted in Swift Arrow's expression. Not quite trust, but a grudging respect. "You will remain here until my son is well," he declared. It was neither a request nor entirely a threat. Sarah nodded, knowing she had little choice. But as she watched Yellowbird cradle her sleeping son, a small smile of relief crossing the mother's worried face, Sarah felt a sense of purpose that transcended her captivity. Here, in this hostile place, she could still be what she had trained to be, a healer. "You will have a teepee of your own," Swift Arrow instructed, and guards, do not attempt to escape. I won't leave while your son needs care, Sarah promised, surprising herself with her sincerity. As she was led away, the curious eyes of the entire tribe followed her. A white woman healer defying their expectations, doing what their shamans could not. Night fell over the camp, bringing with it an uneasy peace. In her small teepee, guarded by stoic warriors, Sarah sank onto a buffalo robe and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. Tears silently tracked down her cheeks as she thought of her traveling companions, now dead, of her plans to establish a practice in California, of her uncertain future among people who viewed her as an enemy. Yet somewhere amid her fear and grief, a small spark of determination took hold. She had been given a gift, the ability to heal, and now in this most unexpected of places, that gift might be the key to her survival. The days stretched into weeks as Little Hawk recovered under Sarah's care. The boy, initially wary of the strange white woman with her unfamiliar medicines, gradually warmed to her presence. His natural curiosity overcame his suspicion as he watched her prepare herbal remedies and tend to his needs with gentle efficiency. "How do you know which plants heal?" he asked one afternoon, sitting up in his bed of furs, strength visibly returning to his thin frame. Sarah smiled as she mixed a tonic of willow bark. "I learned from books and teachers, but also from watching and listening. Many of your people's plant medicines are similar to what I was taught." Little Hawk considered this. "Our shamans say healing comes from the spirit world. Perhaps we speak of the same thing in different ways," Sarah replied diplomatically. "I believe knowledge and care bring healing, but there are many things in medicine I cannot explain." Their conversations became a daily ritual, with Little Hawk acting as an unexpected bridge between Sarah and the tribe. He eagerly translated for her, his facility with English surprising her, until he explained that a missionary had visited their band several years earlier. Swift Arrow observed these interactions with conflicted emotions. The white woman had saved his son when his own people's medicine had failed. Yet she represented the encroaching threat that had been decimating his people for generations. "She speaks to Little Hawk of the white man's world," Running Wolf warned one evening as they watched Sarah demonstrating to the fascinated boy how to use a simple microscope she carried in her medical kit. "She will turn his heart away from our ways." Swift Arrow's jaw tightened. "My son's heart is Comanche, but knowledge of our enemy may serve him well in the battles to come." As Little Hawk's health improved, Sarah found her role in the camp evolving. Word of her healing skills spread, and despite initial resistance, other tribal members began seeking her help for various ailments. A child with an infected wound, an elder with painful joints, a pregnant woman struggling with sickness. Each patient she treated strengthened her position within the tribe, though she remained under guard at all times. Her captivity continued, but the nature of it shifted subtly. One afternoon, as Sarah gathered plants at the edge of the camp under the watchful eye of her guards, Yellowbird approached her. "My husband's brother returns from hunting with a wounded arm," she said without preamble. "Will you come?" Sarah nodded, gathering her supplies. The injured warrior, Stone Bear, regarded her with open hostility as she entered his teepee. A deep gash ran along his forearm, already showing signs of infection. "I will not be touched by the White Witch," he spat in Comanche, which Sarah had begun to understand in simple phrases. Yellowbird translated his objection more diplomatically, but Sarah had grasped his meaning. She met his glare steadily. "Tell him the wound is infected," she said calmly. "Without treatment, he may lose his arm, or even his life." When Yellowbird relayed this, Stone Bear's expression darkened further. "Then I will die as a Comanche, not saved by white medicine." Sarah considered her options carefully before speaking again. "Ask him if a Comanche warrior fears a woman's touch so much. Even enemy women were sometimes taken as healers among my people's tribes." It was a calculated risk, challenging his courage, but Sarah had observed enough of the tribe's culture to know that bravery was valued above all else. Stone Bear's eyes narrowed at the translated words, but after a tense moment, he grudgingly extended his injured arm. Working quickly but thoroughly, Sarah cleaned the wound, applied a poultice of herbs known for their antiseptic properties, and bound it with clean cloth. "Tell him to keep it dry and clean. I will check it tomorrow." When she returned the next day, the infection had already begun to recede. By the third day, clear signs of healing were evident. Stone Bear offered no thanks, but the hostile glare had diminished to wary acceptance. That evening, Swift Arrow summoned Sarah to sit at his fire, an unprecedented honor for a captive. The significance of the invitation was not lost on the tribe, who watched with curious eyes as she took her place across the flames from the chief. "My brother says you have a strong medicine," Swift Arrow began, studying her face in the flickering light. "He says you did not call on spirits or perform rituals, yet his wound heals cleanly." Sarah chose her words carefully. "I believe in cleanliness and certain plants that fight corruption in wounds. It's not magic, just knowledge passed down and improved upon." Swift Arrow nodded slowly. "Knowledge is power. My people have always known this." He paused, appearing to make a decision. "Tomorrow you will begin to teach Little Hawk your healing ways." Surprise flashed across Sarah's face. "You would have your son learn white medicine?" "I would have my son learn all medicine," Swift Arrow corrected firmly. "The world changes around us. The Comanche must adapt or perish." His expression hardened. "But know this. If you poison his mind against our ways, my knife will find your heart." Sarah met his gaze unflinchingly. "I will teach him what I know of healing. Nothing more, nothing less." Later, alone in her teepee, Sarah reflected on the strange turn her captivity had taken. She had come west seeking independence, a chance to practice medicine without the constant scorn and limitations placed on female doctors in eastern cities. Now, ironically, she had found a kind of grudging respect among those considered savages by her own society. As she drifted toward sleep, Sarah realized that for the first time since her capture, she had not thought about escape that day. The realization troubled her, suggesting a dangerous complacency. Yet she couldn't deny that alongside her fear and homesickness had grown a fascination with these people and their ways, and an unexpected sense of purpose in this unlikely place. Summer faded into autumn, painting the prairie with golden hues. Sarah had been with the Comanche for nearly 3 months now, her status evolving from captive to something more complex, not free, yet increasingly integrated into tribal life. Her teepee still had guards, but they functioned more as escorts than jailers as she moved about the camp tending to the sick and injured. Little Hawk proved to be an exceptional student, absorbing Sarah's medical teachings with remarkable speed. His small fingers soon became adept at bandaging wounds and measuring remedies, while his quick mind retained information about symptoms and treatments after a single telling. "You have the hands and eyes of a healer," Sarah told him one afternoon as they worked together, setting a hunter's broken finger. The man barely flinched as Little Hawk held the bone steady while Sarah secured the splint. The boy translated her words for the injured man, who nodded respectfully despite the pain. When they finished, Little Hawk beamed with quiet pride. "My father says knowledge of many paths makes a warrior stronger," he told her as they walked back to the central part of the camp. "But some of the elders disagree. They say white knowledge weakens our spirit." Sarah considered this carefully. "Knowledge itself is neither good nor bad. It depends on how we use it. The same plant that heals in small amounts can poison in large doses." Little Hawk nodded thoughtfully. "Like the rattlesnake. Its bite kills, but the shaman uses a tiny bit of its venom in certain medicines." Sarah smiled, continually impressed by his insights. "Exactly like that." Their conversation was interrupted by commotion at the edge of the camp. Warriors were returning, and from their urgent pace something was amiss. Swift Arrow emerged from his teepee, his expression darkening as he received their report. Little Hawk listened intently before turning to Sarah, his young face suddenly solemn. "Soldiers are camped near the river. Many soldiers. The scouts say they have big guns." Sarah's heart raced. The camp had periodically relocated over the past months, staying one step ahead of the U.S. cavalry forces tasked with forcing all tribes onto reservations. This was the closest the military had come to finding them. That evening, the tribal council gathered to discuss their options. To Sarah's surprise, Swift Arrow summoned her to attend, not to speak, but to listen. She sat silently at the edge of the circle, acutely aware of the significant trust this represented. The council's debate was heated. Some warriors advocated for immediate attack, arguing that surprise would give them advantage. Others urged retreat deeper into the territory they knew better than any white man. Swift Arrow listened to all views before speaking. "The soldiers outnumber us 5-1, he said finally, his voice carrying authority that silenced all others. "They have cannon and many rifles. We cannot defeat them in open battle." Stone Bear, now recovered from his wound, spoke up fiercely. "Then we separate into smaller bands, as we have done before. We disappear into the hills and plains." "And then," Swift Arrow challenged, "winter approaches. Our children and elders need shelter and food. How long can we live as scattered bands before hunger weakens us?" A heavy silence fell over the council. Sarah could feel the weight of the impossible choice before them: fight and likely die, or retreat and slowly starve. Swift Arrow's next words shocked everyone. "I will speak with the white chief. Perhaps terms can be reached." Outrage erupted from several warriors. "Surrender," Stone Bear spat. "Better to die fighting." Swift Arrow raised his hand for silence. "Not surrender. Negotiation. There is a difference." His eyes found Sarah across the council fire. "The healer woman will accompany me. Her presence may stay there triggers long enough for words to be spoken." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Was he asking for her help or simply using her as a shield? Either way, she realized this might be her only chance to return to her own people. Yet the thought brought more complicated emotions than the simple relief she would have expected months earlier. The next morning, Sarah rode beside Swift Arrow and two of his most trusted warriors toward the cavalry encampment. She wore a clean dress that Yellowbird had helped mend, her hair neatly braided. Swift Arrow had instructed her to appear as white as possible. "What exactly do you want me to tell them?" she asked as they rode. "The truth," Swift Arrow replied simply. "That you have been treated with respect. That you have seen we are not the bloodthirsty savages they believe. That we seek peaceful passage to winter hunting grounds before discussing terms for spring." Sarah studied his proud profile. "And if they demand immediate surrender to the reservation?" His expression hardened. "Then we will know negotiation is impossible, and we will make other plans." The cavalry spotted them half a mile from camp. A contingent of soldiers rode out to intercept them, rifles ready. Sarah's heart hammered as she recognized the blue uniforms she had not seen in months. "Halt!" called the lieutenant leading the soldiers. "The woman comes forward alone." Swift Arrow tensed beside her. This was the moment of greatest danger. Would they shoot once they had her safely away? Sarah made her decision quickly. "I will not come alone," she called back clearly. "These men have treated me with honor. I will speak with your commander, but they come with me under flag of truce." The lieutenant hesitated, clearly surprised by her response. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "You will all be escorted to Colonel Mackenzie. Any suspicious movement will be met with force." In the commander's tent, Sarah found herself in the surreal position of translator and mediator between Swift Arrow and Colonel Ranald Mackenzie, a stern-faced man known for his effective campaigns against tribes throughout the territory. "Mrs. Mitchell," the colonel began after confirming her identity, "we had presumed you dead after the massacre of your wagon train. Your survival is remarkable." "Dr. Mitchell," Sarah corrected automatically. "I am a physician, and there would have been no reason for my survival to be remarkable had your forces provided the escort promised to our wagon train." The colonel's eyebrows rose at both her title and her accusation. "The frontier is a dangerous place, madam. Resources are limited." "Indeed," Sarah replied coolly, keenly aware of Swift Arrow's silent presence beside her. "Which is why I believe the proposal Chief Swift Arrow offers deserves your full consideration." For the next hour, Sarah translated as Swift Arrow outlined his position. His band needed access to their traditional winter hunting grounds to survive the coming months. In return, they would consider terms for a more permanent arrangement in the spring, not the distant reservation the government demanded, but a territory adjacent to their sacred lands. Colonel Mackenzie listened with thinly veiled impatience. "The government's position is non-negotiable. All Comanche are to report to the Fort Sill Reservation immediately." When Sarah translated this, Swift Arrow's expression remained impassive. "Tell him we know of the reservation. We know of the spoiled food, the disease, the broken promises. We know few who enter leave alive." The negotiations continued in this vein, reaching an impasse that seemed unbridgeable. Finally, Sarah took a risk. "Colonel," she said, no longer simply translating but speaking on her own behalf. I have lived among these people for months. They saved my life when your cavalry failed to protect our wagon train. I have seen their community, their honor, their way of life. Forcing them onto the reservation under current conditions amounts to a death sentence. Your sympathy for your captors is understandable but misplaced, Dr. Mitchell, Mackenzie replied coldly. Stockholm Syndrome, the Europeans call it. Sarah's spine stiffened. My medical assessment of reservation conditions is professional, not emotional. The crowding, poor sanitation, and inadequate rations guarantee outbreaks of disease that will devastate these people. For the first time, something like doubt flickered in the colonel's eyes. What exactly are you proposing, Doctor? A compromise, Sarah said firmly. Allow Swift Arrow's band winter access to their traditional grounds. I will remain with them as both hostage and physician. In spring, I will personally oversee their transition to a negotiated territory, ensuring proper medical facilities and supplies are established before any permanent relocation. The colonel stared at her in disbelief. You volunteer to remain their captive? I volunteer to be the bridge that prevents unnecessary bloodshed, Sarah corrected, and to ensure that the United States government honors its obligations to human decency, if not its treaties. As the meeting concluded with a tentative agreement to consider her proposal, Sarah caught Swift Arrow looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Surprise, certainly, but also something that might have been respect, or even trust. That night, as they camped a safe distance from the cavalry, Swift Arrow finally spoke of what had transpired. You spoke for us when you could have secured your freedom. Why? Sarah gazed into the small fire between them. Because what awaits your people on the reservation is wrong. Because Little Hawk deserves a chance to grow into the healer he could become. Because, she hesitated, then continued honestly, because in these months I have come to care what happens to you all. Swift Arrow nodded slowly. The colonel may yet reject your proposal. Yes, Sarah acknowledged, but he may not. Either way, it buys time. Time your people desperately need. As they sat in companionable silence, Sarah realized how profoundly her perspective had shifted during her captivity. She had come to see the humanity in people her society considered savages, and recognized the savagery in what her own civilization called progress. Whatever happened next, she knew she could never return to seeing the world as she once had. Winter descended on the plains, bringing bitter winds and snow that blanketed the Comanches' winter camp, nestled in a sheltered valley. Colonel Mackenzie had reluctantly agreed to Sarah's proposal, with modifications. Swift Arrow's band could winter in their traditional grounds, but come spring, they would need to make a decision about their future. The temporary reprieve had come with an unexpected development. Sarah was no longer considered a captive, but an official intermediary, a status that gave her a unique position in both worlds. The colonel had provided her with basic medical supplies on the condition that she send regular reports about the tribe's activities and health conditions. You walk between two worlds now, Yellowbird observed one evening as they worked together preparing dried herbs for winter remedies. It is a dangerous path, but perhaps a necessary one. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of her responsibility. I never imagined when I left Boston that this would be my calling. Yellowbird's weathered hands paused in their work. The Great Spirit leads us on unexpected trails. My husband believes you were sent to us for a purpose greater than just healing our son. The women's friendship had deepened over the months, bridging cultural divides through their shared experiences as healers and caretakers. Yellowbird had taught Sarah traditional Comanche remedies, while Sarah had introduced modern medical techniques that complemented indigenous knowledge. As winter progressed, Sarah divided her time between treating the tribe's medical needs and working with Little Hawk, whose apprenticeship had become official. The boy's natural aptitude continued to impress her, as did his ability to integrate both traditional and Western approaches to healing. You must press firmly here, Sarah instructed, guiding his fingers along a patient's abdomen, but gently here, where the tenderness indicates inflammation. Little Hawk nodded seriously, his touch confident yet careful. The elderly woman they were examining smiled despite her discomfort, clearly proud of the young healer in training. He has the gift, she remarked in Comanche, which Sarah now understood reasonably well. the same gift my grandmother had. Later, as they prepared a digestive remedy for the elder, Little Hawk confided in Sarah. Before you came, I was to be a warrior like my father. Now he speaks of me becoming a healer for our people. Does that disappoint you? Sarah asked carefully, aware of the cultural importance placed on warrior status. Little Hawk considered the question with a maturity beyond his years. A warrior protects the tribe from enemies you can see. A healer protects from enemies you cannot see. He looked up at her earnestly. Both paths require courage. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her young student. That is very wise, Little Hawk. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a scout, breathless with urgent news. Swift Arrow immediately called the council together, including Sarah. Soldiers approach from the east, the scout reported. Not Mackenzie's men, different uniforms. They ride with Tonkawa scouts. A ripple of concern passed through the gathering. The Tonkawa were traditional enemies of the Comanche, known for allying with white soldiers as scouts. How many? Swift Arrow asked. Perhaps 30 soldiers, 6 Tonkawa. They follow our old tracks from before the snow. Swift Arrow's face remained impassive, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle tension in his shoulders. These were not the troops under Mackenzie's command, with whom they had an agreement. This was another unit entirely, perhaps unaware of the arrangement, or worse, ignoring it. We should strike first, Stone Bear urged. Use the snow and our knowledge of the valley. Swift Arrow shook his head. We have women and children. The agreement with Mackenzie gives us protection. If these soldiers honor it, Stone Bear countered. All eyes turned to Sarah. Would Mackenzie's agreement be recognized by other military units? Swift Arrow asked her directly. Sarah considered carefully before answering. Official orders would be, yes. But communications are poor in winter, and some commanders... She hesitated, then continued honestly. Some see glory in victories against native tribes, regardless of agreements. Swift Arrow absorbed this information with a grim nod. Then we must ensure they know of the agreement before blood is shed. He turned to Sarah. You will ride with me and 2 warriors. Your presence may prevent immediate hostility. The next morning, they set out through the snow-covered landscape. Sarah wore a combination of Comanche winter garments and her own clothes, creating a visual statement of her intermediary status. They located the approaching soldiers before midday, intercepting them in a small clearing. The cavalry officer, a young lieutenant named Harrison, reacted with obvious suspicion to their appearance. His hand remained near his pistol as Sarah identified herself and explained the arrangement with Colonel Mackenzie. I have no orders regarding any such agreement, Lieutenant Harrison replied stiffly. My instructions are to locate and escort all Comanche bands to Fort Sill Reservation. Then I suggest you verify with Colonel Mackenzie before proceeding, Sarah replied with all the authority she could muster. I am acting as both medical officer and liaison under his direct orders. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed. You expect me to take the word of a woman who appears to have gone native? For all I know, you're here under duress. Sarah straightened in her saddle. I am here as Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a licensed physician and official intermediary. My reports to Colonel Mackenzie can be verified at Fort Richardson. The standoff continued, tension mounting until Sarah made a bold decision. She reached slowly into her satchel, producing her medical credentials and the official letter Mackenzie had provided, authorizing her position. You may escort us back to the Comanche winter camp to verify my role, she offered. But I caution you, any hostile action would violate a direct agreement with your superior officer. The lieutenant studied the documents, clearly conflicted. Finally, he nodded curtly. 2 of my men and I will accompany you to verify your claims. The rest of my unit will make camp here and await our return. The compromise was precarious but acceptable. As they rode toward the Comanche camp, Sarah maintained a calm exterior while inwardly acknowledging the knife's edge they walked upon. At the camp, the lieutenant was visibly surprised by what he encountered. Rather than the primitive savagery he clearly expected, he found an organized community. Sarah deliberately guided him through areas where he could observe daily life. Children at play, women working at winter crafts, the orderly arrangement of teepees. Most significantly, she brought him to her medical tent, where Little Hawk was tending to a young child with a persistent cough. The boy looked up as they entered, his manner professionally composed despite the intrusion of a uniformed soldier. "Lieutenant Harrison, this is my apprentice, Little Hawk." Sarah introduced them formally. "He is preparing a eucalyptus steam treatment for bronchial inflammation." The lieutenant watched with poorly concealed amazement as the young Comanche boy confidently continued his work, explaining the procedure in careful English when Sarah prompted him. "You're teaching him modern medicine?" Harrison asked, his tone suggesting he found the concept almost inconceivable. "He's learning to integrate traditional knowledge with modern techniques," Sarah corrected. "Little Hawk has a natural gift for healing. In another world, he might become a renowned physician." Something in her words seemed to reach the lieutenant. He observed the camp with new eyes as Sarah arranged a meeting with Swift Arrow to discuss their situation. The negotiations that followed were tense but productive. Lieutenant Harrison agreed to send a rider to Fort Richardson to confirm the arrangement with Colonel Mackenzie. In the meantime, his unit would make camp a respectful distance from the Comanche settlement, with no hostile actions on either side. "You've created something remarkable here, Doctor," Harrison commented as they concluded their talks. "Though I confess I don't understand how you've managed it." Sarah smiled slightly. "Perhaps by remembering that human dignity and respect transcend the boundaries we draw between peoples." As winter began to release its grip on the land, bringing the first tentative signs of spring, Sarah found herself contemplating the uncertain future. The temporary arrangement with the military would soon end, forcing difficult decisions for Swift Arrow's band. One evening, as she sat with Swift Arrow, Yellowbird, and Little Hawk around their fire, the chief posed the question that had been left unspoken. "When spring comes fully, you could return to your people," he said, studying her face in the firelight. "Is that your wish?" Sarah considered carefully before answering. "My place is with my patient," she said finally, looking at Little Hawk with genuine affection. "My apprentice still has much to learn, and there is important work to be done here. The soldiers will still demand we go to the reservation," Yellowbird reminded her gently. Sarah nodded. "Yes, but perhaps not the reservation as it currently exists." She turned to Swift Arrow. "What if we could create something new? A settlement where your people maintain their culture and sovereignty, while establishing proper medical facilities and sustainable practices that satisfy the government's concerns." Swift Arrow's eyes reflected the dancing flames as he considered her words. "You believe such a thing is possible?" "I believe it's worth fighting for," Sarah replied with quiet determination. "Not with weapons, but with words and knowledge and the truth of what I've witnessed here. Colonel Mackenzie listens to me, however reluctantly. Lieutenant Harrison's report will confirm that your band poses no threat. We have allies, however few." Little Hawk leaned forward eagerly. "I could continue learning medicine, maybe someday study with other healers, then return to help our people." The hope in the boy's voice crystallized something in Sarah's heart. She had come west seeking purpose and independence. Through the strange twist of fate that had brought her to these people, she had found both, along with a cause worthy of her skills and passion. "It won't be easy," Swift Arrow cautioned, though Sarah could see he was considering the possibility seriously. "Few things of value are," she replied with a smile. "But together, we've already accomplished what many would have deemed impossible." As the fire burned low, casting its warm glow over the small family circle that had improbably become her own, Sarah felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead would hold challenges and setbacks, prejudice and politics to navigate. But she had found her calling in this unexpected place, not just as a healer of bodies, but as a bridge between worlds that desperately needed to understand each other. Little Hawk reached across the fire to take her hand, his young face solemn with trust. Yellowbird nodded her approval, while Swift Arrow's usually stern expression softened with something like acceptance. In this moment of connection, Sarah understood that some captivities became freedoms in disguise. What had begun as her greatest tragedy had transformed into her most meaningful purpose, helping forge a future where traditional wisdom and modern knowledge could create something stronger than either alone.